Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Aces High, and I'm bringing you guys some more Napoleonic Wars. I'm wound up in this stuff. I am just too deep to stop. I'm loving it. It's just something I never learned about in high school and middle school and primary, secondary school, as you might call it in Great Britain. Anyway, we've pushed through a bunch of them. If you guys haven't seen them, go check them out on my channel. I'll go ahead and link the playlist right up. I don't know. I think it's up here. Uh, anyway, this is actually going to be the third and final part of Epic History TV's Russia part of the Napoleonic Wars. So it's titled Napoleon's Retreat from Moscow 1812. It does say part 3, The Retreat. However, this video is like 30 minutes long, so I'm just going to watch the first 15 minutes, and then I'm going to break it up into a second video that I'm going to have the second 15 minutes. We'll call it part 4. Just because nobody wants to sit here for like 40 minutes after commentary and everything. You guys understand. Before we get into it, I do need to thank Epic History TV. They're awesome. Go check out their channel. I'll link the video in the description. And give them a sub. Give me a sub. We'll all be happy. And you'll get to see a lot of really cool videos. Anyway, let's get started. I'll shut up now.
The 15th of September, 1812. 83 days after invading Russia, a week after his costly victory at Borodino, Napoleon entered Moscow. He expected to be greeted by dignitaries, formally offering the city's surrender. Instead, he discovered that 90% of Moscow's inhabitants had fled.
Really?
A fire had started the previous night and was blamed on drunken soldiers. But over the next 48 hours, fires continued to break out across Moscow until most of the city was ablaze. Count Fyodor Rostopchin, the city's governor, had ordered that Moscow be destroyed rather than allowed to fall into enemy hands. And now fires were being started deliberately by Russian criminals freed from jail and acting on police orders. French soldiers rounded up and shot any they could catch. But the inferno was impossible to contain. In 4 days, 2/3 of Moscow was destroyed. With the fires finally under control, Napoleon's soldiers...
I never knew that Moscow, basically burned to the ground. 2/3 of it gone. That's incredible, you know?
Soldiers turned their attention to systematically looting the ruined city. While from his new quarters in the Kremlin, Napoleon sent a letter to Emperor Alexander in St. Petersburg, inviting him to make peace and end the war.
Interesting.
He received no reply. Napoleon waited.
No reply? Does that mean that Alexander killed the messenger? Isn't there a whole line about that? Don't kill the messenger?
Confident that Alexander would eventually negotiate. But as the days passed, he grew increasingly uneasy. Cossack raids were disrupting his vital communications with Paris, as well as the arrival of supplies. While the steady attrition of French forces and Russian reinforcements meant Napoleon was outnumbered for the first time in the campaign.
Wow.
Rumors also reached him that his reluctant allies, Prussia and Austria, were in secret talks with his enemies. Napoleon had proposed that the army winter in Moscow, but that now looked too dangerous. Reluctantly, he accepted that the army would have to move back to Smolensk to find safe winter quarters. Napoleon knew how severe Russian winters could be, but continued to put off his departure, reassured by fine October weather, and hoping that at the last minute there might be a message from Alexander offering peace. It never came. On the 13th of October, the first light snow fell. 5 days later, Kutuzov launched a surprise attack on Murat's advance guard at Vinkovo and defeated it. Napoleon, stung into action, gave the order for the army to leave Moscow the next day. Our video sponsor.
Sorry, let me skip this, you guys. It's a great game, though, World of Tanks.
"100,000 men of the Grande Armée left Moscow in a column 10 miles long, with an estimated 40,000 carriages and carts. There were women and children too, army wives and the vivandières, the women who cooked for the soldiers, as well as some civilians. Every wagon and pack was stuffed with as much food and loot as possible. As he set off, Sergeant Bourgogne of the Imperial Guard made an inventory of his pack. It contained several pounds of sugar, some rice, some biscuit, half a bottle of liqueur, a woman's Chinese silk dress embroidered in gold and silver, several gold and silver ornaments, amongst them a piece of the cross of Ivan the Great. Besides these, I had my uniform, a woman's large riding cloak, 2 silver pictures in relief, 12 inches long and 8 high, all in the finest workmanship. Also several lockets and a Russian prince's spittoon set with precious stones. I wore over my shirt a yellow silk waistcoat, which I had made myself out of a woman's skirt. Over that, a large cape lined with ermine and a large pouch, hung at my side by a silver cord. This was full of various things, amongst them a crucifix in gold and silver and a little Chinese porcelain vase. Then there were my firearms, powder flask, and 60 cartridges in the box.
Wow. That's a lot of loot.
This heavily encumbered army did not yet realize it was in a race against time. The Russians were beginning to move against the flanks of Napoleon's 550-mile-deep salient. That very day, Wittgenstein's army was driving back Marshal Saint-Cyr's outnumbered force at Polotsk and drawing Victor's 9th Corps west to support them. In the south, Admiral Chichagov's advance had Schwarzenberg's Austrian Corps falling back to cover.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would mostly be the Austrian Corps because the Saxon Corps was defeated. I wonder how many of them still, were around at that time.
Warsaw. The corridor was closing. And then there was the weather. Though Napoleon was confident his army could reach winter quarters in Smolensk in 20 days, well before the more extreme temperatures were due to hit. Napoleon planned to withdraw via Kaluga, through unspoilt country where the army could forage for supplies.
Okay. I was just about to ask why go this way instead of the direct way, but that makes sense. This way is probably just ruined already.
But Kutuzov sent General Dokhturov's 6th Corps to block the road at Maloyaroslavets. In fierce fighting, Italian troops of Eugene's 4th Corps drove the Russians out of the town. It was a hard-won victory, reminiscent of the fighting at Borodino. Kutuzov now stood between Napoleon and Kaluga. Napoleon now took the unusual step of conferring with his marshals. And after discussing various options, he decided that rather than seek another major battle, they would retreat the way they'd come, along the Smolensk road.
I've got a question. Why can't they stay in Moscow? I know 2/3 of it burned down, but the fires have been contained at this point, and you still have 1/3 of Moscow. That's huge, I would assume that they could stay there, honestly.
Napoleon had hoped to avoid this route, as it meant marching back through country already stripped bare of supplies. The day after the fighting at Maloyaroslavets, Napoleon was nearly captured by a group of Cossacks, and saved only by General Rapp's charge at the head of his escort.
Wow.
After this close shave, Napoleon had a phial of poison made up, which he carried around his neck in case of capture. Napoleon's army set off on its new course. Shadowed at a respectful distance, by Kutuzov's army to the south. They passed the old battlefield of Borodino, a grisly, unnerving sight where crows pecked at half-buried corpses. Relentless marching quickly began to tire out men and horses. A few days later, the temperature fell below freezing. The army's overworked, starving horses died en masse. Discipline began to break down, as some drivers simply dumped the sick and wounded by the roadside to try to ensure their own survival. As the French column became increasingly strung out, General Miloradovich, commanding Kutuzov's advance guard, fell on Davout's rear guard outside Vyazma. For a few hours, Davout's first corps was cut off, until Eugène and Ney came to his rescue. The battle ended with street fighting in Vyazma, as the French hastily evacuated the burning town.
Wow.
For the soldiers of the Grande Armée, so unaccustomed to retreats and routes, Vyazma was an alarming, demoralizing blow.
It's incredible.
On the 4th of November, it began to snow heavily.
They're so close.
The next night, temperatures plummeted to minus 20 degrees centigrade. Few men or women had proper winter clothing or access to shelter. Many froze to death overnight.
Oh my God.
The next morning, wagons and guns were abandoned. Many soldiers sought to save themselves, ignoring officers, stealing horses and food, and leaving the column to scour the countryside for supplies. Many of these foragers were found by the Cossacks. Some cut down or lanced, others robbed of every possession and left to freeze. In a few cases, they were handed over to peasants, eager for retribution against the foreign invaders who had plundered all they owned. As the army struggled on towards Smolensk through blizzards, Napoleon ordered Eugène's 4th Corps to strike out for Vitebsk, where there were large French supply depots. But Vitebsk had already fallen to the Russians. 4th Corps was too weak to fight its way through, and rejoined the army, minus its artillery and most of its baggage. A colonel who saw 4th Corps at this stage described men without shoes, almost without clothes, exhausted and famished, sitting on their packs, sleeping on their knees, and only rousing themselves out of this stupor to grill slices of horse meat or melt bits of ice. Just 3 weeks after leaving Moscow, a third of the army was dead or captured. About half the rest formed a growing army of stragglers, men without units, prepared to fight only to survive. Napoleon reached Smolensk on the 9th of November. The first troops into town ransacked the supply depots, leaving nothing for those who followed, including Ney's rearguard, which arrived 6 days later. Napoleon had hoped to make Smolensk his winter base, but the state of the army and lack of supplies meant the retreat had to continue. But the 5 days he spent there gave Kutuzov time to circle ahead and prepare an ambush. When the French retreat resumed, he struck 30 miles west of Smolensk at Krasny. In 3 days of desperate fighting through knee-deep snow, Napoleon used his Imperial Guard to hold open the road, as Eugène and Davout's corps fought their way through the ambush with heavy losses. 2 regiments of the Young Guard were ordered to make a sacrificial counterattack to keep the Russians at bay, and were virtually annihilated.
Oh my God. See, this is why you don't face Russia in the winter. Oh my God. I understand he planned to stay at Moscow, but Jesus Christ, man.
Kutuzov held back many of his troops and was blamed for not trying to destroy Napoleon's army when he had the chance. It's possible he was concerned at the number of raw conscripts in his own army, also suffering terribly in the freezing conditions.
Alright, you guys, let's have a talk. We're going to stop it there. We'll watch the other half in the next episode. I mean, what'd you think so far? So far, it's crippling. It looks like the start of the downfall and full-on retreat of Napoleon. He's lost so many soldiers at this point. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You cannot take Russia on in the winter. You absolutely can't. If you have foot soldiers, they will struggle. You have to have heavy winter gear, and even then, you will probably still lose. It's just, I mean, it's been proved countless times. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It really is. Not to mention just some of the brutal parts of war, like some of those soldiers that abandoned are given to the peasants. And I mean, what do you think they did with them? They tortured them or put them to work, or who knows? You know, I mean, just wow. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. We do have one more part. We'll finish up this video next time for the second half of the Retreat of Moscow, brought to you by, or original video by Epic History TV. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Anyway, love y'all. This is Ace High, and I'm out.